Hey, y'all, welcome back to a Wednesday, August 28th, 2024 edition here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We've got more important issues here on the program. Yeah, a crossover, more important issues with Landon and Caleb talking all things, you guessed it, Tennessee Vols here on a Wednesday. We talk about whether or not Tennessee is a 10-2 lock and all the optimism that's been growing over the last month or so in terms of what Tennessee can ultimately get to in the CFP and all that good stuff. We talk about whether or not Alabama or Florida is a bigger game this fall. We talk about whether or not Squirrel White will be a 1,000-yard receiver this season for Tennessee. We predict which game will ultimately be the best game for Tennessee this year, and a whole lot more Tennessee Vols talk as well on this program with Landon and Caleb talking, you guessed it, all things Tennessee Volunteers. Don't forget, folks, before we dive into today's episode, a little bit of housekeeping. You can watch this show, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. Like and subscribe if you are watching us here on the YouTube channel. Also, if you are listening to this program instead of watching it, that's awesome, and you can do so at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you get your podcasts. If you are a long-term listener or a first-timer and you like what you hear, please, please, please make sure you hit that pause button right now and leave this show a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. You can learn more about what we're doing over on this very program at chasethomaspodcast.com with past episodes, information about the show, and what makes this Knoxville's #1 independent Tennessee Vols sports podcast. So make sure you check us out and everything we got cooking over there on the official website, chasethomaspodcast.com. You can get in touch with the show at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com as well. But that will do it here on a Wednesday. Uncle Darren, let's go.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We got some first timers over here. I mean, this is, a long time in the making here. There's Xander Seacrest's best friends trying to get new Tennessee baseball coaches fired before they even wow, that was a tongue twister. Fired when they just got rehired before the next season even starts. So that's what we're bringing on here because I respect it because it was a great podcast with Ross over there on the More Important Issues podcast that you should go check out if you are not already. It's Landon, Raby, and Caleb Mitchell. Landon, Caleb, how's it going, guys?
Good, man. Good. I want to preface that we are Xander's is our friend. We're not or
best friend.
Maybe, yes, he's he likes us more than we like him.
Oh,
yeah.
We've just been doing him favors over the years. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been boosting the confidence. So we kind of made him what he is.
Well, when he was in the podcast, he was on with Kirby on my show in March, I want to say. And I was just looking at the rotation and what Tennessee was coming in with. And I mean, the three aces was, obviously you were able to pencil that in. In the last couple of years, I think Tennessee baseball, you had a pretty good idea before the year, like what their weekend rotation was going to look like. Mm-hmm. But I looked at it and I was like, Xander's going to be in the weekend rotation. And on the podcast, I was like, you're probably going to factor in here. And it was just like, well, you said it. And it was just one of those where I respected him not getting ahead of himself. But I was like looking at it, I'm like, Xander's, I don't see he's going to fit in somewhere on the weekend at a certain point. I don't think any of us, even as y'all being lifelong Xander friends, saw the kind of run that he was going to have May to June, because that's an all-timer that may never be topped in Tennessee lore. I
think we were more nervous than he was for that game.
Yeah, definitely the final. Landon and I talked about it, especially as the season got closer. Like he's your Sunday guy, and it's his to lose. And every Sunday, just you kind of got a knot in your stomach right before the first pitch.
Yeah,
and it's the easiest dude to cheer for in the world. Mm-hmm. And the story of him being at Tennessee in today's just era of college sports in general, kind of sticking it out, just playing his role. And then when the time comes, he ends up being the guy that wins you the national championship is beyond awesome.
And it was such a that's baseball type deal where the makeshift rotation on the weekend where the Xander Snead combination just ended up being exactly what you needed on Sunday. I think everyone assumed that Drew Beam would be the steadiest going into this year, and I think most weekends he was actually. It wasn't like it was bad. It was just there would be like it was kind of like Doe in year 2, where you knew that there were going to be 2 to 3 runs, maybe 4, and things got a little dicey, but he would still be able to go long if you needed him to. High K rate, that kind of thing, but it wasn't the same as what you'd seen the prior year. Still solid, just not an elite. Like it wasn't AJ Russell stuff you were seeing on Friday. Like it wasn't even Andrew Lindsay on Friday a year ago, which kind of came out of nowhere. But and then you look at Friday where Chris Thomas just worked out. Sometimes it'd be one batter and then that'd be it. Like a couple pitches sometimes it would be. I mean, he was electric personality coming off the mound in the first inning. It was great to get the ball started on Fridays, but that worked with AJ Causey where you're like, oh, he just can't start. He's going to be really good for like, he just can't be in there right away. I mean, it was so interesting. And I think it's a testament to just how good of a pitching coach Frank Anderson is that he was able to piece this all together and to make that work and this be the title rotation. Just kind of, I don't know. It's one of the things you love about college baseball is you just never know. And we have all these ideas of how it's going to look here in August, and we can guess which freshman might make the weekend rotation, whatever. Like, where does AJ Russell fit in at some point? But like, you just don't know, and they'll figure it out. And it might not be what you think it is, and that's what makes it great, right?
Yeah, Frank Anderson's a mad scientist. And so for him to just like, I'm not even worried about next year because like you just kind of like put it together of how it kind of worked out. It was just like the perfect puzzle put together. And so next year he just has a bunch of arms and he's just going to figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think so. And we'll get into maybe some baseball here in a second, but it is football time. And I think a lot of folks are chomping at the bit here for some football on Saturday. And we were just talking here, Caleb, before we got on. I appreciate the football staff and being as transparent as they were this week in terms of who's going to start and what the depth chart really looks like. I'm glad that that's all cleared up going into this weekend.
Yeah, I mean the fact that in this day and age and the transfer portal and guys coming in, a lot of freshmen that are highly touted, it's good to go into week 1 and have a clear view of who's going to be in that starting role. And you've got a stud, potential All-American at running back, and he's the clear starter. I think that's good. He doesn't need an award next to his name.
No.
Which is insane, right? That Dylan Sampson got an award out of all the people. Why didn't we get Nico an award?
James Pierce got an award.
James Pierce got an award. The whole defensive line, I think, got an award. I think the whole defense, actually. The whole defense was an award, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I think the entirety of the defense is we'll see. Let's see how we're feeling on Saturday morning.
3 oars in one position.
Oars undefeated.
Spectacular.
Or is undefeated.
Best player in Tennessee in like 6 years, probably.
Yeah. Gotta be.
Crazy. Well, I want to start off here, guys, because one of the things I've been thinking about this week, and this is like the most battered ball syndrome type question to throw out here, a couple days out from what should be and just a fantastic 2-year run here with Nico Iamaleava and company, and just all the good vibes around this Tennessee football program. But the amount of 10-2s I've seen pop up for the predictions now, like I had Brent Hubbs on last week, friend of the show, notorious, like always kind of like, let me see some stuff. Like 8-4, 9-3 is more of Brent's comfort zone here with Tennessee. You don't want to get too high on the Vols coming into the year. But even he went 10-2. I'm a little nervous because I think a lot of fans now are looking at this like playoff. Like this is a playoff team. We should be 10-2 with this schedule. It's a favorable schedule. I think it kind of worries me just how many people are predicting Tennessee to win double-digit games. Because in 2022, it came out of nowhere in a little bit. Like a lot of it was schedule luck, getting LSU at 11 a.m., winning at Pitt in overtime. That was a sneaky, really important one, finding a way to win and just a slot fest to get you on the right path. But then you had this break in between Florida and Alabama this year. You get Florida and Bama back-to-back. I understand both are at home, but that's a lot of emotional football in back-to-back weeks for Tennessee to get through. And I mean, Oklahoma, like I need to see what time that kickoff is. If it's at night, I don't know if I'm going Tennessee there. If it's a noon Central 11 o'clock kickoff, I'm going Vols. Like, I think that's one of those where I don't want a 12-hour Oklahoma fan who hates Josh Heupel, has spent the day tailgating, drinking, and everything else ready for the Vols at night for Nico's true first road SEC game. So, I mean, I think there's still a lot of variables yet to be worked out, but do y'all feel the same, that you're seeing all this 10-2 optimism and you're just like, all right, I wish somebody would kind of like put us back in the, hey, they could surprise some folks, because that's a much more fun place to be when you feel like you can exceed expectations relatively easily.
I'll go first. I think I get considered by Landon at least the Negavol in our group, which is funny. While I'm also the one who said I'm not 100% on Nico, I've also said his ceiling's New York. He'll be a Heisman contender. I think 10-2 is one of those that you're right. You draw it up and you're going that you found a map to it. I think a lot of fans think that is the road that is the straight shot. And I think I get it. It's a lot of optimism, so I understand that. I think 10-2 is there's a lot of branches to get there, and kind of figuring out, and a lot of things have to go the right way. You have to stay healthy in certain areas. You're right. Just looking at Florida and Alabama by itself, that's a lot of football. 120 minutes has to go your way. No matter how you slide, like you have to figure that out 120 minutes of football to go your way in a row. And so it's a lot of variables that get to 10-2. I think it's very doable. I see 10-2. I mean, I'm trying to even think of a probability. I mean, way over. Some people are going 8-4. Oh, this team could lose 5 games. 10-2 before we go 7-5. Maybe 10-2 before we go 8. Yeah, maybe 10-2 before we go 8-4. I mean, obviously, again, going into how things, because I have us at 9-3.
Yeah.
And so obviously one game could go wrong and you could go either way. And I don't know how to really write that out. And I'm not a math guy, so I don't know how the probabilities swing. But I think there's a roadmap to get there. I don't think it's as straight a shot as a lot of people want to make it out to be, but it's very doable. 11-1's another doable one. 12-0, here's the Negavol in me. I'm sorry, guys, I don't see it happening, but it would be awesome. But I don't see it, but I see a roadmap to 10-2 that's doable. And I think if Nico is not even saying what I hope, what everyone hopes he is, just if he is 2022 Hendon Hooker, what me and Landon have been saying on the show lately, I think 10-2 is that's what Hendon Hooker did. So I think it's very doable with a loss to South Carolina. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing too, if you want to look at it, like, there's no South Carolina at the end of the schedule. Like, there's no road overlook spot. And there are other variables, like what does that game look like if Jeremy Banks is at linebacker? Like, I don't know if Jeremy Banks plays in that game, what the defense looks like. But in terms of just the schedule, I mean, that's Mississippi State at home in that spot this year. So Tennessee's schedule it could end up being a blessing or a curse here, Landon, right? Because you have these 3 road games to kick things off, and Nico talked about, like, he wants to play more on the road. So we're about to find out if there's some Casey Clausen to Nico Yamaliava, just the Iceman in him, where he's like, no, I actually really do love silencing the crowd, and I'm not fazed by going on the road, whether that's in Charlotte against NC State or in Oklahoma to face the Sooners. But like, 3 road games, Tennessee not playing an important home game until October 12th. That feels good, because if you can get through that first slate 6-0, I think 10-2, honestly, at worst, is what you're looking at, because Heupel's lost 1 home game in the last 2 years, and it was to the best program in the last 5, and a team that hasn't lost a regular season game since 2019, and the guy he lost to is on his staff right now. So I just look at it as like, okay, maybe that's good that you have these early road tests for Nico and company, but we've also seen Heupel's 4-4 on the road in SEC play in the last 2 years. So I don't know. I go back and forth. I'm like, is it good that you're kind of going to have to go through 2 SEC teams on the road and then that neutral site against a top 20 team in NC State? Will that kind of set you up the same way that LSU and Pittsburgh set you up in 2022? Or could that cause a ripple effect down the line where you're pressured going into Florida because you already got 1 loss against whether it's NC State or Oklahoma? And then it's like, oh, we still have Georgia looming at the end of the year on the road in Athens, and now we have a lot of pressure to sweep Florida and Alabama to get to 10-2 and to make the playoff. Like, the expanded playoff, like the weekly implications, I feel like are going to be exhausting for coaches and to keep these players ready to go, because you can't overlook it. Like if you drop Oklahoma and you're Tennessee, you go into Florida week with a lot more pressure. If you go into Florida week undefeated, it's like, hey, let's play loose. Like Neyland's going to be rocking. It's going to feel like 2022. You got one loss. It's like, we might be in do or die mode, because the playoff just, we can't bet on 9-3 getting us in there. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'm kind of leaning 9-3, and just because of like the history, and I know this is a new team, shouldn't really look at history, but South Carolina sticks out for sure. 2022. And then that Florida game last year was miserable. And is that just like Josh Heupel on the road? I think this is a huge year to like kind of put that to bed. Is on the road really a problem?
Yeah.
Because if it's not, and South Carolina was just, it happened, it was a fluke, and Florida was just, we can't win in the swamp for whatever reason. But I think that Oklahoma game is a huge game just because of that. Like, is Tennessee going to play good enough on the road to win that game? If they do, then you put yourself in the driver's seat, as long as you take care of business against NC State and Kent State, Chattanooga, of course. But then you kind of put yourself in the driver's seat to be in that playoff. Like I feel like there's a lot of pressure building up for that Oklahoma game, but I feel like you don't really get to let loose, because then you got Florida and Alabama and Georgia still left on the schedule. Like there's not really a let's catch our breath moment until you get to that, like you said, Mississippi State game. And that's at home. So that it makes me feel a lot better that it is. And they're just horrible. So
yeah, 100%. Caleb, Tennessee take you're most confident is right going into this season?
I don't know if I've had a lot of hot takes. I know I try to stay away from scorching takes. So I think all my takes are fairly level-headed. I guess again, I've seen this one a lot, so I don't know if it's super hot. I mean, I think Tennessee beats Alabama for the second time in 3 years at home.
Okay.
I think I'm more confident in that take than the Florida one. Alabama's a hurdle I feel like you got over against a really, really good Alabama team. Last year, looking at it, that was a really unfortunate way to finish a game. I think maybe, I guess this is a part of that take. Is Brew McCoy healthy? Because I think Tennessee has a really good chance to win that game last year if Brew McCoy's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You also have, in my opinion, a better quarterback if it's tight down the stretch. But I think Tennessee beats out, I guess, at home, beating Alabama. Don't see field goal posts getting thrown in the river this time, but that's okay. And
that's part of the program getting better, right? It's not as big of a deal. It's like we just took care of it like that. Hey, like we just beat them and that's it. Smoke your cigars and move on. Like it's just business.
It'll still be a fun night in Knoxville. Yeah, it'll still be fun in Knoxville. There just won't be 100,000 people on the field this time.
Yeah,
after the game. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to change going forward with Alabama. I don't know if that's a real hot take, but
well, you mentioned like you're more worried about Florida, and this is something I've gone back and forth on. Because are you saying that you could see Tennessee still beating Alabama if they lose to Florida the week prior? Because I look at that as like, if you drop Florida, it's because of some crazy like Florida had the ball and a chance to win 2 years ago, and they had no business winning that game with the onside kick and Tennessee just giving Florida every last breath to steal that one in Neyland. Like, I just feel because those games are back to back, you lose to Florida in excruciating fashion. I think it's going to be really hard to get up off the mat against a better Alabama team the week after and just rally and play your best football. Because, I mean, I think Alabama is going to be a playoff team this year. I think they're going to be really good. Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, I'm not in the Kalen DeBoer is going to crap this talent away.
I don't think so
now, see where he's at in 4 years, sure. But I'm not. I think he's a good football coach. He's going to do a lot with his talented team. I don't think I think you're on the right track there. Like I'm not disagreeing, especially that's just college football, right? It's tough for teams to bounce back. I think that's where my battered Vol syndrome doesn't really come into play. I've seen this team bounce back from some really bad and sure not last second losses, but just some really tough losses and respond really well. So I don't look at that as a huge detriment. I'm not going, that because that's a loss. That next week's going to be a loss. But certainly should come into play. I think I look at Florida and you go, yes, you almost choked away 2022. Don't know how, but you almost did. And part of why Florida still scares me has really not much to do with their talent. It's that Billy Napier's going to come in and coach how he did in 2022. They're going to do a lot of weird stuff. They're going to go for it on 4th down 7 times or however many it ended up being. And they're going to make you play a weird game of football for 60 minutes. So you have to play, again, a perfect 120 minutes in those back-to-back weeks if you want to win both of them. I think Florida's a tough test for Tennessee because Billy Napier's not going to do that every week. And I don't think it's because Tennessee's this just huge rival to Florida, but there is something to Florida fans, the players, the athletic department as a whole, wanting to beat Tennessee and Neyland.
Yeah.
And so he came in 2022. He had nothing to lose, and the dude's going for it on 4th down in his own territory. I mean, make sense. So yeah,
I mean, Brian
think
Kelly was doing that. It just didn't work the same way. Remember, I mean, Brian Kelly was doing some crazy 4th down attempts in that game.
I respected it. I said, if you watch the Florida game, you kind of have to.
Yeah. Well, also they couldn't get Anthony Richardson down. Like Byron Young was getting home, and they just couldn't bring him down. Like Anthony Richardson, there were a lot of moments where it should have been over, and maybe it would have been if it was Pierce or the defensive line Tennessee has now. And Graham Mertz is not going to be able to withstand the same thing that Anthony Richardson. They're not built the same. Sure. I don't think it's going to go the same.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't even get that ball close to the end zone. I don't think Anthony Richardson's got to the end zone either on that final play. I think he was 5 yards short.
Kamal got it at like 10 or 15 and fell down. He started running and then he fell. Like I remember losing it. But were y'all at that game? Were y'all in the building for that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do y'all remember? I mean, that one of the funny things about that game is I remember saying to my wife when there were people around, they were like killing this inflatable gator by our seat, and they were really talking a bunch of shit at the Florida fans in our section. And I was looking at her and I was like, have they lost their mind? Have you been asleep for the last 20 years? Like, you think this is over? Like, what do you mean? Like, this is not even close. Like, you need to saddle up, because if you think this is like just Tennessee's going to run away with this thing and this is not going to be just nauseating for the next hour and a half still, y'all are out of your mind. Like, why are you like there are some fan bases Tennessee can just like kind of trash talk and like, hey, just buck up at. Florida's not one of them. Florida's just not. Like they're not that. You don't want to poke the bear there. Like it's just one that they have bragging rights in that regard over the last 20 years. So it just blew my mind, like how confident they were. And it was just, I mean, as the game keeps going, you're like, oh my God. Like I felt worse about that game than Alabama. Like every big moment, even the Dallas Turner scoop and score, I was like, I think Tennessee's okay. I think Tennessee's still okay. Florida, I was still just like, this feels bad. This just feels bad. Did y'all feel the same?
Yes and no. I hate the FU Florida chant. I'm not gonna sit here and yell "be classier" at people when they start the FU Florida chant. I just go, have you watched their plays while we chant that? Because it's normally a 60-yard game. So can we please stop it?
Yeah.
But then also we did the Florida chomp, and I don't know if the just moment came over me. I didn't join in because I know I know the history of this, but I enjoyed it. So there was some irrational confidence there. Similar, I guess, to how I'm irrationally worried about that game this year.
That's not irrational. Yes, and that's the rational thing. I think fans need to stick to being rationally nervous about Florida coming to town. Like that's a rational thing. Like you did not get over it. Like it was not an easy win 2 years ago.
I was there for that 10-9 Muschamp game. I think that was the game he said, I love to see all these sad fans leaving. I'm thinking, I'm not even sad about the loss. I just watched just a 10-9 football game in 93-degree weather in September, brother. It has nothing to do with you.
Well, that's maybe an up, right, Landon? Is that it's going to be in October? Maybe it's a little bit chillier because Tennessee because that's the other part of this rivalry, right, with Florida is that I think most Tennessee fans are like, can we get this in November, please? Can we move this like when Florida's their season's starting to spiral? I'd rather get Florida in November. Like I don't really love getting.
That's the last
Florida.
time we won in the swamp, right?
Yeah,
is when December. It was later when they moved it. Yeah,
yeah.
So, yeah, I think my thing on that game is like, man, I'd almost rather be behind than ahead in a Florida game.
Yeah,
I feel better about my chances because I know how this goes.
Yeah. Do you have your own Tennessee take that you're most confident in going into this season?
I think Squirrel White gets over 1,000 yards.
Oh,
I don't know if that's a hot take because he had did he have like 800 last year? But I think he is, obviously he's a slot. Obviously he's going to have more chances. I would hope, a better quarterback. But I think that offense is just going to hum a little bit more with, I think you have more dudes around him that just kind of like it helped Jalen Hyatt out a ton. Having guys like Brew McCoy and Cedric Tillman helped Jalen Hyatt get open. Now his speed helped a lot too, but having other guys that you could just kind of like figure out your mismatches with was huge. So I think Squirrel White kind of has, I'm not going to say a Blitnikoff year, but I think he is a first team all SEC receiver.
Interesting. I guess it's the reason I would be surprised by the 1,000 yards is I think Chaz Nimrod and him are going to rotate pretty heavily. I think the fact that there is so much smoke about Chaz Nimrod and his size and how good of a fall camp and summer he's had, I also just think you're going to see less of those kind of crazy statistical seasons because I think Tennessee, when you're one of those programs that are thinking college football playoff, I think a lot of these programs are going to look at this of like, we're rotating as much as possible. So I think when fans are worried about the secondary and how much Tim Banks is going to rotate, I'm like, I think it's just going to be different across the board because I think they understand that we might be playing 16 games here this fall. We got to conserve guys and we need to conserve snaps. So my gut is, and that's part of where you want to get to, is that you have these options where there's not a drop off when you go from Squirrel to Chaz for a drive, and that they're pretty close and you're able to conserve both those guys. So I don't know. My gut is like Dylan Sampson, like on Saturday, we'll see very limited amount of Dylan, but then we'll see a bunch of Dylan against NC State. And then we'll see him scale back against Kent State. And then you know what I mean? Like, I just think they're going to be very careful with how this usage goes with their most important players. I think Squirrel is one of their most important guys. So I'm curious what the yards look like and how they handle this, especially a receiver, Caleb, because there's never been this amount of potential to rotate at that spot. I mean, we're 2 years removed from them trusting 3 guys and just riding it out with those. And it worked to top 10 offense, but I don't know. I think they're going to have to rotate a bunch. And I wonder what that means for the numbers across the board.
Well, if we play 16 games, I feel very much confident that Squirrel White's getting 1,000 yards. Yeah. And that's another thing for me with the wide receivers. You talked about them rotating. I just got to see it. I mean, and like you said, there is a ton of potential to do that. You have talent behind those guys, but to this point, we have not seen them rotate very much at receiver yet. So,
yeah, I made that joke a few weeks ago. I said, we'll find out if Josh Heupel really just wants to play 3 wide receivers because this is the first year he'll have the opportunity not to. And so, if you only see 3 guys, it's by choice, not by force. And to your point, I don't think I've ever considered the longevity of the season as to why you may see more of a rotation. That I think it's a good thing to consider, especially late in games when they may play another drive or 2. You may see a heavier rotation there, or just you're done altogether. And the Landons, we've talked about that take before because I don't hate the take in terms of I think Squirrel's your leading receiver. The yardage I wonder about just because I feel there is not even rotation wise, there's just a lot of wealth to spread. Just look at the other wide receivers, but then you look at the tight ends. Dylan Sampson's, I think you're going to be better catching the ball out of the backfield as a whole. Dylan Sampson being the premier guy in that. Nico's going to use his legs more. So I think he's your leading receiver. I'm curious to see if he gets to 1,000 yards. I think if he gets to 1,000 yards, that's a really good sign for your offense because I think there's guys kind of right at his heels.
Yeah.
I think Dante Thornton is still someone I'm buying a lot of stock in. I think he has the Javonte Payton year. Ben McKee made this point on the Go Vols 247 podcast last week, and I was like, that's such a great comp. It's like if you just get Javonte Payton, like a souped up version from Thornton this year, you'll take that every day. Like he had 6 TDs and 18 catches. Like that was bonkers. Like he had that first play. Remember, I love the Kentucky one where the broadcast isn't even set up and ready, and they miss going to Javonte on the left hand side, and Javante's just off to the races and the broadcast like, oh, he's gone. All right, Tennessee's up 7-0. And they were just like, whoa. It was a great moment because like you never really catch the TV off, but they were like, they just thought they were lining up and just said, nope, Javante's already off to the races. It's like a big 60-70 yard touchdown reception on that screen to him. But that was great. I don't know. I think that that could be interesting. Landon.
Yeah.
The best Vols football game this fall will be which one? Which one do you think will come back this time next year, recapping this season, and we'll say this was the best game for Tennessee?
Is it? Can I just like selfishly say it?
Yeah.
Okay. So selfishly, I think anytime you beat Florida in anything is a great day. So I'm going to go Florida game. I think it can be Alabama, but if I'm just going based off like what I'm predicting, I'm going to go Florida. Just beat the brakes off Florida would be the best case scenario. So I'm going to go with Florida beating the brakes off of them.
I think that might make fans like you can go 9-3, and if that 9-3 includes blowing out Florida and Knoxville, and you still miss the CFP, I think everyone's taking that. I think that's something that they love, like because you haven't been able to experience that. You've experienced a lot in the Heupel era. You've not experienced a Florida game on ice in your home stadium early. Yes.
Game. Wow,
that buys some goodwill for sure.
Right? I don't know.
Buy a lottery ticket.
I mean, a stress-free Florida game is that's a great one. I mean, it's great for Florida fan or for Tennessee
fourth
fans
quarter.
There.
Just to give me a stress-free fourth quarter, go into the third up 2 scores or something, and maybe pad one in there in the fourth quarter. I would love to sit down in the fourth quarter versus Florida. Maybe the people behind me have already left. They got to get home early. They've got a little kid with them, and I can lay back and kick my feet up. I would love that. Nothing more.
Yeah. Is that your pick? Is it Florida, or do you have a different one, Caleb?
Florida, I think, is going to be a really fun one. I think of course, we're getting the national championship team back for Alabama, but there's also a thing called Champions Weekend against Kentucky, which I imagine there'll be some type of. In fact, I think they should honor them every game, but I think there'll be something for the Kentucky game. You'll get the basketball team honored against Kentucky. I'm gonna think the networks, or I guess really just ESPN, now will do everything in their power to make that a night game.
Yeah, I
think Kentucky will be a really, really fun day. Everything, football included, but everything all encompassing. It won't be Urosh this year. I'm not sure who will walk the SEC championship trophy over towards the Kentucky fans and let them know what their dear departed Cal hadn't brought them lately. So yeah, I think that'll be and then they've got to remember, while they did share a title of the SEC regular season baseball championship, they did not get the one that really matters. So I think that'll be a fun day.
That one, I mean, is that always going to be a dark mode game now? Are we just like locking in Kentucky as the dark mode October game?
Halloween,
it's Kentucky or South Carolina, I think, forever. And I'm okay with that. I want orange and white, which is the rumor that Danny White is mandated against Alabama, Florida, and any other big games. In fact, I kind of hate watching highlights of LSU in 2022 and seeing gray rather than orange. That would have been, especially if you'd gone all orange, would have loved that.
Well, I like they're getting rid of the gray this opening weekend. Like, because I don't really mind the smoky grays, but I'm glad that they're getting rid of them. And it's a nobody. Like, you know,
if they don't use them again, I'm in.
Yeah, everybody gets to play in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you all get to play in it. That's good. And it's also, you can sell it as it's an in-state game. Like, hey, we're wearing the in-state, the TriStar uniforms against the in-state team. Like, we're doing a solid for the Mocs. But yeah, I tend to agree. I'd probably still say Alabama is going to be the game. Like, a lot of people have penciled in Oklahoma, and what I've told folks over the last few weeks, and something I've written about, is like, I think one of two things happens at Oklahoma. Either Tennessee blows out Oklahoma and stuns them and silences the crowd, and Heupel has his vengeance, and Nico rolls in his first road SEC game, and it's like, oh, he's here. Like, this is a Heisman, like, big Bryce Young type. Like, this is happening. Or it's the House of Horrors that we've seen from Tennessee on the road in SEC play sometimes, where they just lay an egg, in like Mizzou last year, or at Florida, or at South Carolina, where you're like, oh, okay, flush it. Like, that, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Penalties were outrageous. They couldn't get a stop on 3rd and long. The secondary looked out of whack. Jackson Arnold just diced up the secondary. We got to make some changes and regroup, get home, get back in Neyland and regroup. I just think it's one of those two. Like, I don't see that being a great game. Do y'all agree? Like, because every way I look at it is, I'm like, Tennessee either blows them out or they get embarrassed and Fashion have to come back and, all right, let's regroup at home and get the season back on track. I don't see it being a close game to the end.
Well, real quick, I don't. The history of Tennessee, if you look at kind of how the games have gone, that Tennessee's played on the road poorly, notably Missouri and Florida, that statement certainly stands true. It never felt like Tennessee, while you look at this box score, it's like, all right, they had a chance against fourth quarter against Florida. If you were there, they didn't. It wasn't going to happen. I think one thing, though, that is going to hopefully make those games tougher to occur this season, I think, is your defensive line. You're going to be really, really good in the trenches. You're going to wreak a lot of havoc. So I see that as certainly something that could happen just because it's happened. But I think you're going to see a lot more mistakes get erased at the line of scrimmage. Honestly, I think your offensive line's healthy. I think it's that way on both sides of the football, but definitely on the defensive line.
I mean, that's the other point is like Cooper has to be healthy all year. Like that's just that's just like the thing none of us are going to talk about because you don't want to put that out in the atmosphere where you're like, hey, we still don't really have a backup center. So if Cooper's out early when you have 3 important road games, that's a problem. That kind of changes the trajectory of the season if Cooper isn't right, but looks like he's healthy and by all accounts ready to go. So that's got to continue with Cooper. And I'm high on William Satterwhite, and I think he'll eventually be that guy. Maybe it's next year, but asking a true freshman to step in there, it's probably going to be unlikely. So you probably go Dane Davis, who's going to like, there's a fun over-under is like, does Dane Davis like over under 6 starts for him, but it's all at different positions. Like his left guard, he has to fill in. Center 1 week he fills in. Right tackle, he fills in because that guy can play every position. But I don't know. Like I like Tennessee's starting offensive line. I obviously love the recruiting in the last 2 cycles here. I think they are going to have a lot of starters out of these last 2 cycles with 24 and 25, but I think there's just no depth this year behind these starters. Like these guys have to be healthy. Like you have to have these guys ready to go. Javontes has to play. John Campbell has got to be ready. He's got to play down the stretch. Lance Hurd's got to be healthy at left tackle because you got Larry Johnson, who we'll see, but we have not seen him play any. I mean, he's a JUCO transfer. We'll see what he looks like as a backup. I mean, he's going to get some action, I'm sure, this Saturday. But I mean, you're in a spot where this is a very very high upside, but low floor. If injuries really ravage this offensive line this year, and that could change the whole. Like, it's something we don't really talk about because we don't want to put out there in existence, but it's there, like beneath the surface. You look at it, look at the depth chart, and you look at behind the Coopers and the Hurds and everything, and you're like, that doesn't look like an SEC offensive line. If the injuries ravage them a little bit.
Yeah, I think my thing with the whole thing is like you're looking at the end of the season. If Dane Davis has like 1 or 2 starts, I think your record is probably 10-2. But if you're looking, and this is not a shot at Dane Davis, but I think if you get in a mess with, if you get in a mess with injuries and he has, 9 or 10 starts on the year, I feel like you're going to be hurting. And I guess depending on where he's starting at, but you don't want him to be left tackle, center, because then you're.
If he has 4 starts at center, Tennessee's not winning 10 games.
Exactly.
I'm just gonna go.
I've said it, and I until I'm proven wrong, Cooper Mays is the most important player probably on this team, but certainly on this offense.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. Which game would Vols fans be most upset if they drop this fall? Based on y'all's interactions and what you know about Vol fans, what does your gut tell you? Like, if they drop this one, this is the one that will actually irritate them more than any other game.
You want to go, Caleb?
Yeah, I think there's kind of 2 levels to it because it's Florida. If you look at Tennessee going something like 9-3 or have a good season still, an acceptable season, you lose to Florida. That's the obvious answer, I think. Next on that list, I think would probably be, there's like the obvious ones that I would guess are quote unquote doable. And obviously they have a lot of questions, but it's Kentucky, a team that's been competitive, not so much in Neyland, except for, when their best quarterback or their best player is our quarterback. Not it happened as often, but there's some talent there. They're big and physical on the line of scrimmage, and that plays a big factor into games. So I think that would be the, I guess, most upsetting one that I could see happening. Whereas Florida would be incredibly upsetting, but you're also thinking, what's new?
Yeah. And the Gerald Mincy factor there too, is he'll be starting right tackle. And didn't he? There was something in the offseason. Did he tweet or Instagram post something?
So he might have Instagram commented. I think Instagram comment wars are starting. I know Jonas Adu had some that he dropped as well. Gerald Mincy may have been one of those.
Arkansas, Tennessee to open the SEC schedule. Oof.
Oh god!
I mean, they know what they're doing with that one. They, goodness gracious. Is that the same for you, Landon? Is it Florida or Kentucky? I think Kentucky's a really good sneaky one where it's like you drop that one. Like, I mean,
that gets Tennessee coaches fired. You lose Kentucky, you lose your job.
Especially at home. Like if you have the playoffs, like that would feel like the South Carolina game 2 years ago, where you're like you had all like because you're probably sitting at 1 or 2 losses at that point, and the playoffs right there, and you just drop just a stinker against Kentucky at home with Champions Night and everything. That would hurt. That would sting.
I'd join in the riots. I'll burn something down.
Are we just going SEC game here?
Well, I mean, because you don't have to, but I guess outside of that, it's NC State. But yeah,
you lose Chattanooga, I feel like we might be lighting the torches.
Yeah,
I think it's got to be Florida, just because of what happened last year, and I don't know what Florida's going to look like, but they have like one of the toughest schedules in the country, and they start off at home against Miami, so I feel like you're going to tell real quick what kind of Florida team we're going to be playing.
Yeah.
And just be prepared that they're going to be all world when they play us, no matter what their record is.
But still hope for Miami. You don't want undefeated Florida who's feeling good because they beat UCF and Miami. You don't want undefeated Florida coming
No. You don't want to have them have any momentum whatsoever. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is Florida just because of what happened last year. And
yeah, you talk about them having an all-world game. We'll know how much the Tennessee game means to Florida as a whole. If they fire Billy Napier before Tennessee, they're going for some interim magic. Like they're thinking if we put an interim coach in place, that's a win. And so we'll know for sure because they could fire him tomorrow and there's not a single Florida fan that would be upset.
I mean, it's a big year for him. I think he has to go bowling to save his job. And I don't know. Like I'm still they have some talent. I still think Graham Mertz is weirdly underrated. Like I didn't think seeing what he was like at Wisconsin. I mean, he was bad. He got a lot better at Florida. Second in completion percentage behind Bo Nix last year. He doesn't throw picks, so he's not like I don't know. Like it's one of those where we'll see what their pass catcher losing Ricky Parasol is going to be tough. I think they'll be able to run the football, but the offensive line seems a little shaky to me. And I think Tennessee should be able to dominate that offense. I mean, that's the main great thing about the Oklahoma game is that 5 new offensive linemen for Oklahoma. That feels like Tennessee should just kind of do what Georgia Tech did to Florida State, where they should just control the line of scrimmage, and that should be the game. Is Tennessee's defensive line that should be their first wrecking havoc game? Is on the road at Oklahoma against that offensive line. Like, oh, this defensive line really actually might be the best defensive line in the country because what they're going to be able to rotate. I don't think. I mean, y'all would know better than I. I mean, has Tennessee ever been able to rotate edge guys like they have this year? Like you've never had just 4 blue chippers, 2 5-stars that are just they're all capable of getting after it. Because like, look, I like Byron Young, I liked Roman Harrison, but like this is a different rotation. Like they were solid, but this is all 4 like dudes who can just get after the passer and they can just rotate at will. And I think Tennessee's going to just be bonkers off the edge this season.
And that's what's super impressive is, yes, there's a ton of talent at the top of that group, but it's also just really deep with dudes.
Yeah.
You look at what's behind James Pierce, and there's still a dude waiting in the wings. And so, I mean, you obviously get excited for a guy that's being lauded as the best player in college football. But it's also really nice that when he needs a break, you're not really losing a step.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't play a lot, and he still got 10.5 sacks last year. He started, 4 games? Roman Harrison started the majority of last season, and it was really not until late that Pierce really got a lot more opportunities. I mean, he was obviously huge in South Carolina A&M, but it wasn't like the snaps. Like, I'm curious with, like, a high snap count when teams game plan for him, what they do. But it's like, okay, well, Omen Armin Lott was great on third downs. He's a great pass rusher in the interior. Tyler Barron, I'm curious what that looks like because they're doing kind of the money ball rotation on the strong side defensive end, where I think Dominic Bailey, Jason Jenkins, Tyree West, and
David
Terry
Hobbs.
Weathersby are just going to evenly rotate. We're going to look at the end of the year and be like, wow, their snap counts are almost all the exact same for those four all year long. But I don't know. I just think they're just going to be able to get after the quarterback at a level we've never seen at Tennessee. I understand the John Henderson years, the Derek Barnett's, but I think third down, the reason I'm not as scared or not as nervous about this secondary is just they're going to be able to get home on a lot of these times. So like for the folks worried about the back end of this group, I mean, I just don't think quarterbacks are going to have a lot of time to go deep. I don't think they're going to have a lot of time to challenge these safeties on third and long, because I just think that the defensive line is going to get home more often than not.
Yeah, and I think for 4 quarters too. Like, yeah. I mean, you look at our offense, you look at opposing defensive linemen in that fourth quarter, their hands are on their hips. Like they are done, gassed. And I feel
then you have a fresh Caleb Herring coming in and just being like, all right, what's up?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a luxury Tennessee hasn't had I don't remember it ever being this deep. Now I'm only 29, so I don't know all the years, but I assume you haven't had 4 guys like, Jordan Ross was one of the best edge rushers in the country, and he might see the field a little bit, but
I think he's going to play. I think, like I said, I think they're just going to rotate, and I think they're going to keep these guys fresh. And
but he's somebody that, like, normally in a Tennessee roster, he gets a lot of playing time.
Yeah, but there's just too many good players, and they're all in the system. They haven't transferred out, but it's also a testament to Rodney, because Rodney rotates, and these guys know they're going to play. And he's done a really good job. I mean, Brian John Marie did that at linebacker, and it seems like William Inge is going to do that this year. But I think, and then the corners. I think this is the best cornerback room Tennessee's had to this point. 100%. I like Kamal, and Gabe Judy-Lawley was like the most underrated, I think, last year. He was solid. I wish they got one more year of Gabe, because he'd be a great third corner with this group. We'll see what Jalen McMurray looks like, but I think Gibson and Jermod are going to be good. And just too many dudes have, like, Heupel mentioning Jermod and Ricky this much. Those are dudes. Like, the fact that they have just popped in him talking about them publicly this much, and Turrentine being like, I haven't seen a guy in my 3 years here making plays like Jermod. I mean, I don't know. I think the corners are going to make some plays. Safeties, star, TBD, but I think cornerback play is actually going to be really strong this year.
Yeah, I think to your point, they're not going to be asked a lot. The passing game is going to kind of be easier for them. I think it's much more about going back to Florida 2022. I hate to do it. Can they make tackles in the open field? Quarterback's going to be flushed out of the pocket a lot. Yeah. You can't have a guy gaining first downs with his feet, especially when it's no knock on Graham Mertz in this regard, but he's not a guy that does it with his feet. So that can't be how you lose when it's someone like him. And that's what they're going to be asked to do. That star position, he is, by all intents and purposes, with this defensive line, he's a linebacker, and he's going to be asked to make a lot of tackles in the open field that are going to be key, especially on third down.
Yeah. Final predictions here, fellas. But on Saturday, what does the score look like for Tennessee Chattanooga on Saturday?
I'll go first on this one. I got 52-7.
Oof. Okay, they cover.
Vols cover. I think you kind of get in, get out. I think you score. I mean, Tennessee does a good job of scoring a lot of points in the first quarter. You maybe get up 3 scores in the first quarter and kind of coast a little bit. But I think it's a weird game where, like, you want to play a bunch of guys and you don't have a lot of opportunities to play a bunch of guys throughout the season, because, I mean, a lot of those SEC games, maybe Vanderbilt, but you got UTEP and Kent State, but you have NC State. Like, you don't have 4 like.
I can't believe Scotty Walden on the schedule again. I want no part of that UTEP game late. That was miserable. Like, when we talk about miserable games last year, the Austin Peay game was the most miserable for me. I don't know.
I think they should have bought him out of it. I mean, I don't. He came into that game to wreak havoc.
Yeah,
he Billy Napiered the game. That's what small schools should do, and he wreaked havoc. And Austin Peay did their best. I mean, they gave it a fight, all they could.
That was painful. That one felt the closest to like a Tennessee Georgia State in a long time. That one actually was like one of those where it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think so, but this doesn't feel good. Like, this is when you go in the half, you're like, you don't feel great. This is not going well.
100%.
I'm glad that this is the first game, because you can, like, maybe like after this game, you can be like, yeah, I can see why there's an or next to James Pierce, because Joshua Josephs, Caleb Herring, and Jordan Ross all look good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of young guys in this. I think people are excited to see Nico, obviously, but what do those running backs look like? Deshaun Bishop, I want to see him. I mean, give him 20 carries. I don't care. You're not going to.
He's used to 40 carries a game. He had I think 800 carries in his last 2 years at Carnes.
Yeah,
crazy. His carries and totals, it's bonkers. He had 60 something touchdowns in 2 years. If you ever want to just look at some crazy high school stats and usage, just look at Carnes' offense for the last 2 years with Deshaun Bishop.
Have you watched his highlight tape?
Huh?
Have you watched his highlight tape?
Oh yeah, I mean I saw it in person. I went to a Carnes Oak Ridge game. I saw it. It's
from
bonkers.
Every position. They'd throw it to him. He'd stand behind the center. I mean, everywhere on the field.
He was
I was president of the Deshaun Bishop fan club this senior year.
Yeah, you were all about the Beavs. You were just look, y'all got to go watch. I mean, it was one of those high school things where when they have a mismatch, it's what am I Swiss Army knife? I'm going to him over and over again. They don't have an answer. No, you're getting the ball 45 times. This is how this is going because they have nothing they can do to stop this.
Right. They blocked my phone number at the football office because I kept calling UT and saying, "You got to get this kid. You got to get this kid." And
he's gonna be good.
One day,
I wouldn't be surprised if he led Tennessee in touchdown running backs with TDs. I think he's gonna be solid. The dude. He had a year off to recuperate, basically, to deal with the amount of usage he had at Carnes. I'm really high on Deshaun Bishop. I think he's gonna be solid for Tennessee over the next couple years. He's gonna fill that Jabari Small role. I feel where he will never be the feature guy, but he'll be consistent and he'll be solid. You'll look up and you're like, oh, he has 18 carries for 76 yards and 2 TDs. All right. Thanks to Sean. In this 45-7 win, you're all right, he does what we need. He's good.
I feel like he's a guy too and they love doing this. When they hit a big run, they'll just keep going until they don't get a big run again. And I feel like he's a guy, he'll go for 7 yards, then he'll go for 8 yards and 10 yards, and then they'll get somebody else in for him. But I think you'll see a lot of Deshaun Bishop, and I don't think you'll see a lot of Cam Seldon and Dylan Sampson, but Deshaun Bishop and Peyton Lewis should be a good kind of backfield for the future there.
Yeah, Peyton Lewis feels like the next Jalen Wright to me. I think Peyton Lewis is going to be a star. I don't know if Sampson I think will be solid. Cam is just the ultimate wild card. It's just really hard. I mean, he's still learning the running back position, been banged up this offseason. He's a huge wild card. All the talent in the world, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like Peyton Lewis in this offense and what we've seen, he feels like the most Jalen Wright type future star where it's he's going to be drafted in the 4th, 3rd round, whatever.
If you give him you spread everybody out and just give him the ball with 5-on-5, he's going to go get 5 yards every time.
And track speed and that it's that blend of power and speed that Jalen had where he had the speed coming out of high school and then he put on the weight and the muscle at Tennessee and it was just, this guy's a madman. Jalen Wright last year was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
What's your final score, Caleb?
I'm going to go 40. I was thinking 49, but I want to spot some special teams love. So we'll go 44. We got 2 field goals in there somewhere. 44-3.
Okay.
I don't think Nico turns the ball over. So I think field position doesn't allow Chattanooga to score a touchdown. But they get a field goal in there somewhere.
I don't think they score. It's going to be so interesting because I just think the defensive line is just going to be ridiculous for Chattanooga's FCS offensive line.
Yeah.
I genuinely think it's going to be rough.
Quarter.
Right?
Before they start going for 4th downs and I think it's late.
I don't think they score in the first half. I would be surprised if Chattanooga scores. Was it 2 years ago? Was it
the only way they scored
who had a pick first play of the game? Was that?
Yeah, that was against
is that Bowling Green?
Ball State, I believe.
Ball State, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first
I think
play.
If the only way they score in the first quarter is the first drive of the game, and you're going, what just happened? If they get the ball first, and you're just, what happened? And you're ready to leave. But that's the only way it happens.
In their first possession. We have some problems. This is not Florida State, Georgia Tech here.
No,
if Chattanooga marches down the field against this defense, we have some real problems. That's a fair overreaction.
Oh, I don't think it'd be an 8-play drive. I think you're talking about a
no, I don't care. I'm no, don't care. No.
Should have enough time to get that off.
It's the most Tennessee thing in the world. You could win 45-7 and we would all be ready to burn the place down if they scored that 7 on the first possession. And I could,
yes,
because it's Tennessee and this game will be played in Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee, I could see it happen.
Okay. We will win that game 45-7, like you said, and then we will drop in the rankings because of that.
Yeah. But who cares?
Florida State will go up.
State.
I had this thought today. What even are preseason rankings? I mean, look at Florida State, and that's all. You can do this every year. There's a team that is vastly overrated. That everyone is going. They might be overrated. First week, they're overrated. They are confirmed. So I don't. We shouldn't start ranking until week 5. Even then, might be too early.
But who cares? You want to be where Tennessee is in that 15 spot. That's just kind of where you want to be. Caleb, what can the good folks check out from you and Landon at More Important Issues this week?
Yeah, we'll be on. I'm sorry, I just got changed over to Landon, so I got confused.
Sorry, yeah,
I like that. That's fine.
I don't know what just happened.
I thought it was my internet, to be honest. I thought I was gone. But we'll be on Fox Sports Knox. Today's Tuesday. That's Thursday from 8 to 10. So you can listen live there. Of course, we'll be on all the podcast streams after that, Apple and Spotify and Amazon, wherever else our RSS feed puts us on. Then you can follow us on Twitter at @more_issues and all the other social medias as well, Facebook, Instagram. I don't think I left anything out there, Landon.
No, you're good. Go follow us. We also got a golf tournament coming up bye week, so plan on that. Be there. Get your team together. You think you got what it takes. So,
all right, intense. If you think of that.
Well, I'm not playing it, so I can talk all the crap I want. So
there you go. All right, well, go subscribe. More Important Issues if you're not already. Football season's here, and it's one of the other great Tennessee Vols sports podcasts that you need to be locked into for this season and going forward. So, Caleb, Landon, thank you so much, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Hey, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.